There's few examples of where we can look at an ancient civilization that used to exist, and we know that this is like a truly lost civilization. And what I mean by that is, we call the Olmecs because when the Spaniards arrived in Mexico and they are asking the Aztecs to teach them about the land of their empire, they point to the people who live in the Olmec heartland, where the Olmecs used to exist, but some 3,000 plus years earlier, and they call them the Olmecs, which is the rubber people. And so that's why we call these Olmecs the Olmecs. But that's not what the Olmecs called themselves. We don't know what the Olmecs called themselves. We don't know what language they spoke. We don't really even understand their government. We don't understand their religious or spiritual beliefs. We don't understand how their society worked. We understand very, very, very little about the Olmec world. And there's only a few other examples throughout the ancient world of ancient civilizations that are like this, that all the context around them is lost. We can actually see them, but all the context is lost. And I think that studying these cultures is like a blueprint, or should be a blueprint for people trying to find other ancient lost civilizations in the future. And so my journey in the Olmec world, this guy right here, his name is El Rey, and he was the very first Olmec. He was the very first ancient monument outside of the United States that I actually saw with my own eyes. And it was while I was on a trip through the Maya world with my professor, Dr. Ed Barnhart, and we're visiting this little Olmec park in the city of Villahermosa. And I looked to my left, and sure enough, he's sitting right there. And something about that one day we spent with the Olmecs just captivated me. And since then, I think I've done like four expeditions and excursions across the Olmec heartland. So today, we're going to talk about the mysteries of Mesoamerica and the origins of Mesoamerica, which starts with the Olmec Enigma. My name is Luke Caverns. I'm an anthropologist, specialized, I guess, in Mesoamerica, but I've just spread out across the world since then. But really, I have a focus on the Americas and kind of casting a light on this dark, lost world. So to start, we have to go back some 12,000 years when agriculture first begins in Mesoamerica. I don't know if anybody knew this, but the Valley of Mexico is actually where agriculture and the growing of corn began. Now, today we have these corn stalks that are like this big, but back then it was just the size of your pinky. And I think that, I don't even know what you would call it, paleobotanists, they think that the first stalks of corn were found up on a cold mountainside around the Valley of Mexico. So over the course of starting from some 12,000 years ago, over the next 6,000 plus years, people are slowly learning how to cultivate even more crops, not just around Mexico, Mesoamerica, but spreading down into South America. The Amazon starts blooming. Has anybody heard here about the man-made gardens that are being found in the Amazon with the terra preta black soil? So all of this just explodes, and we think that it starts right in Mesoamerica. For anybody listening, Mesoamerica is like North Mexico, maybe all the way up here to about where we're at in Arizona, but in New Mexico as well. There's some connections there and cultural iconography that's very, very similar. So we think that possibly the southwest U.S. is the northern edge of Mesoamerica. But that goes all the way down from Teotihuacan to Mexico City, down into Oaxaca, Veracruz, Tabasco, Chiapas, all the way down into maybe El Salvador, Nicaragua. So that's the area of Mesoamerica where we're focusing on the origins of today. So the very first site is the Olmec site of San Lorenzo, and that's our buddy El Rey. He is the largest head that was erected at the site of San Lorenzo. Now, on here I have this labeled 1800 BC. That's like the middle period of San Lorenzo. It goes back to, as far as we know, about 3000 BC. But the weird thing about the Olmec world is, okay, has anybody here ever heard this idea that, when the Great Pyramids are built, they kind of just spring into existence? There isn't a huge incline leading up to the construction of the Great Pyramids. It's just like the Egyptians arrive, the technology is there, and boom, the pyramids are there. Has everybody heard this idea before? Well, there's some discrepancies there. There actually is a couple centuries where it ramps up, but you don't see the technology, yada, yada, yada. There is room there for people to argue against the case. So in the Olmec realm, it's 100% the case. There is absolutely nothing in the archaeological record before the time that the Olmecs are erecting not only these massive heads, and in fact, these heads, I tell people when they join me on expeditions across the Olmec world, and maybe some of you in the crowd have been on me before, or been with me before, but one of the things I say is that your image of the Olmecs is always the heads, but by the time you leave here, you're not going to think of the heads anymore because there's so much more to the Olmec realm. But all of this monumental, it's not really architecture, but these monumental feats spring into existence. There is no pre-era, there is no era of them learning how to achieve these things. We have absolutely nothing in the Olmec archaeological record before the full formation of their society, and these heads just arrive. In fact, it's probably the single best example in the entire ancient world of, there's so many civilizations where they say, oh, it's like this just appears and this just appears. But you really look in the archaeological record, you can see a little string of existence leading up to this massive explosion, right? You can see that all around the ancient world. In the Olmec world, it's just like the Big Bang. Boom, they're there. All right, so we should go through what has been found in the Olmec world. So we have the colossal basalt heads. There are about 17 of these gray basalt heads.
Really quickly, this video is sponsored by Zocdoc. Okay, so let's take a moment to talk about a couple of things that we all experience, but we never really talk about out in the open. It's not uncommon that it's late at night, you're about to go to bed, and you notice something that bothers you, maybe a weird pain or like a bump on your arm. And before you know it, you've sent yourself into a health spiral that goes on until 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and you've spent the last however many hours convincing yourself of the worst possible scenario. And you know that you should just wait until the next day and book a doctor's appointment, but the hassle of having to call around and find a doctor who's even in your network and able to see you just seems like such an unnecessary burden, and so you never book the appointment and the cycle just continues. Like just the other week, I found this bump on my arm and spent hours at night convincing myself of the worst possible scenario, and I knew I should have booked a doctor's appointment, but I knew that finding a doctor was going to be a hassle, and so I was just going to ignore it. But thankfully, that's where Zocdoc came in. Zocdoc is a free website where you can search for in-network doctors, filter by specialty and availability, read verified patient reviews, and then book instantly. No phone calls and no having to sit on hold for 30 minutes listening to the most abysmal music you've ever heard in your life. You see real open time slots, you pick what fits you and your schedule, and then you book accordingly. Most appointments happen within 24 to 72 hours with some same-day options available across over 150,000 different providers, from primary care to mental health, dermatology, dentistry, and much more. Zocdoc made finding a doctor and booking an appointment instantly so easy. I am the type of person that regularly has anxiety about my health, and Zocdoc has made having peace of mind easy and quick. Head to Zocdoc.com/Luke Caverns, which is linked below or on screen, and book a top-rated in-network doctor today. Thank you to Zocdoc for sponsoring this video. Now back to the show.
And we'll get more into the transport, but they're brought from around 90 kilometers away as the crow flies. But it's not like in Egypt where in Egypt, one of the hypotheses is that they're moving the blocks when the Nile is being inundated. So the river rises up, it's flowing even faster. So if you're quarrying blocks, you can somehow, by a means that's never been explained, get them on these massive barges and then just propel them straight up to northern Egypt. But in the Olmec world, you don't have anything quite like that. You've got some rivers, and they're quite hard to navigate, but you have these vast terrains of swamps, mountains, valleys, and then tight, narrow, winding rivers. It's just so much more complicated to transport monuments, not only in the Olmec heartland, but all throughout the Americas. And then so we have the largest head, the Lakobata head. Now, estimates, actually just a few years ago, I had to update this, a few years ago, the estimate of the head was like 40 or 42 tons. Now it's gone all the way up to 50 tons. I don't know who's doing these measurements, but 50 tons is just mind-blowing. And then we have the megalithic altars, which we'll get into what these mean. But again, I'm just showing you that there are more megalithic monuments than just the colossal heads. Now, this guy right here is altar 4. He weighs somewhere around 44 tons, but just sitting off to the side of these Olmec sites, we have these waste deposits of all the basalt that they're not using, so giant chips of basalt. And so what we know is that they are transporting the actual block before they begin carving it away. So look at the lips that used to exist on the right and on the left side. And there's also a lip in the front and a lip in the back. Imagine all that basalt that was taken away. So this thing is somewhere around 40 pounds. It probably would have been 40 tons. It probably would have been somewhere around 50 plus tons when it's being transported. But this isn't even the most impressive thing that they're moving. We have the column tombs. And not only are they just column tombs, but they're just basalt columns. And I'm talking, guys, I'm talking thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of basalt columns are being transported across the Olmec world. I mean, like, far dwindling the significance of the transporting of the Olmec heads with how many basalt columns are being moved. It makes them almost minuscule and completely irrelevant, the actual scale at which they're moving these basalt columns from the same quarries, the same distances. So they're using these to make these column tombs, although it's funny that we call them tombs because guys, please guess how many bodies have been found in these tombs. So here's another one. I think that this guy here, I did a rough measurement on it when I was standing there. I think he's like 14 to 17 tons, and I may have the measurements in here somewhere. And then we also have these mosaics that are created. Now, what's interesting about these mosaics, and we'll get into the details a little bit later on, but these mosaics are made into all different kinds of patterns, and they're using serpentine stones. But these stones don't come from the Olmec heartland. And in fact, nothing that the Olmecs use comes from their own heartland. You have the basalt that comes from the Sierra de la Tuxtla volcanic belt, about 90 miles as the crow flies to the northwest. And then you've got this serpentine green and blue stone, as well as their jade, but that comes all the way from the center of the Maya jungles, some 100 plus miles away. So you have to think the Olmecs are so powerful. This is another mystery. They're so powerful that they're able to commission thousands of tons of these resources, maybe tens of thousands of tons of resources from around Mesoamerica, none of which are they quarrying and gathering and sourcing from their own heartland, and we have absolutely no idea what other civilizations around them got in return. But what I think that it is I think it's knowledge. I think it's ideas. I think it's things that are invisible to the archaeological record that are actually lost to time. But we see that the Olmecs they're a fully formed civilization long before the rest of Mesoamerica arises. And then when the rest of Mesoamerica arises, we see in certain ways that they're copying the way that the Olmecs behaved. And the evidence is, it's hard to spot, and each of these cultures have their own unique identities, but you can see those early seeds of the Olmecs throughout the rest of Mesoamerica. So what I think it is that it's like knowledge. It's esoteric knowledge, cosmological knowledge, knowledge of deciphering the stars. The secrets of the universe are encoded in the stars, as you guys have probably heard ad nauseum this weekend. But so these mosaics right here are very interesting because they're all in a different pattern. These that are on top, archaeologists think that they represent some kind of cosmic jaguar. A lot of that's just pure speculation. But what's interesting about these are stacked in 30 different levels in each cache. So what you're seeing on the left when they're being excavated, that's just one layer. There's 29 more layers down it, and they weigh over 1,000 tons. And archaeologists and geologists who are there, it's easy to tell when a certain site was buried at once. Like a stratigrapher can see it immediately. So they know that these entire caches were created and all buried at the same time. It was never displayed for the public. Nobody could see it. It was something that was meant to be created and put into the ground. It's very odd. Then we have the oldest Mesoamerican pyramid. Now, nobody actually knows how old this guy is. They think that he's somewhere around a little over 3,000 years old, maybe up to 3,500. It could go much, much further back. When it comes to mounds, especially here in the U.S., it's hard to say how old some of these are because you just have culture upon culture upon culture coming through and creating new mound sites and burying things in the mounds or flattening them and expanding them. It's very hard to know, when the origins of civilizations really begin. But this is not only the oldest Mesoamerican pyramid, this is our first pyramid in North America, as far as we know. I mean, there actually, I should say, there are sites in Louisiana that they think are like 9,000, 10,000 plus years old, but these things are like hotly debated, and you guys can probably guess if anybody's ever going to actually look into that to answer that question or not. Then we have monolithic monuments. So this is pretty interesting. This is an Olmec Sphinx. And we used a 3D model that one of our friends brought with us. And we modeled it, and we were able to take this, what you see at the top right, everybody can tell that that's like a weird sort of sphinx, right? And then on the bottom right, that's actually his tail with, we're not really sure what it is, but it's something draping down his back and his tail swinging around his side. Well, what's interesting is this guy that's here on the left, it looks like, he has this iconic sort of Olmec head, and on the right, it looks like the head has eroded away, as if this, the right side of his head was in the ground or something and eroded away. No. This is hard, fine-grained basalt. It was carved to look like that. And what we think it is it's like smoke. And on the back sides of the heads, you can barely see it here, and I believe I have a photo later on here. He's actually grabbing his head and ripping his head in half. So it's a strange Olmec Sphinx here. But we took 3D models of them, and we put them together. And so the museum really needs to go back and try to put these monuments either side by side, or who knows, maybe they'll try to reconstruct it. But this is like a little bitty museum out in this obscure small Olmec town in the swampy lowlands, and they are very underfunded. That's probably never going to happen. So we have more monolithic monuments. At the top left, we have what is a tenon head, which is a mystery because most of the time, tenon heads are inserted into actual buildings that are made with stone. But what's interesting is in the Olmec world, we haven't actually found any buildings made out of stone. It's all these massive, compacted earthwork projects made out of like hundreds of thousands of tons of packed earth, but we have no idea where the tenon heads would have been inserted. Then in the middle, has anybody ever seen these basalt balls before? Anybody know where they come from? Feel free to speak up. Costa Rica, yeah, it's very interesting, right? So we see just one of these guys in the Olmec world. There may be more buried out there somewhere, especially now that we're finding more Olmec cities with using LiDAR. But what it shows us is that the Olmec's reach was very, very far, and probably much further than people actually realize. And I actually think that's one of the great mysteries of the ancient world. We spend so much time looking for like lost ancient civilizations. The other thing I find interesting there that I think is parallel to that is looking for the connections between the civilizations, right? Evidence that these people knew each other and were connected to each other, whether it was through trade or whether it was through, official administration of some kind, looking for the little pieces of evidence that these people knew about each other much further back in time than archaeology can prove. I should say archaeology has proved. So I think that's quite interesting. At the top right, we see the feathered serpent, which I'm sure most people who are familiar with anything ancient America, you know about the feathered serpent. At the bottom left, you see that bird with his head chopped off. We never found the head, but when I first saw that monument, I was so struck because it looks so Egyptian. Like when you're in South Egypt and you're walking up into a temple and you see like these rows of statues leading into the temple, that looks like some kind of obscure bird that would be off to the side. And then at the bottom in the middle, you have an even more fine-grained basalt bird that's carved out. I mean, just look at the feather detail. It's insane what they were able to do. And at the bottom right, you have one of these more iconic Olmec, iconographic, like iconic art style of their faces with these downturned lips. We're going to get more into that. And then here we have a white andesite seashell. Now this guy is probably this big. I'm not sure. He might weigh half a ton. Apparently, it's really, really heavy from what the archaeologist told me. But to be able to make something like this is just so sophisticated. And again, I'm going to probably say this a few times throughout this presentation. The ability to create monuments like this emerges basically out of thin air. There's no precursor era leading up to this, not even an era that you could argue for, like you can with Egypt or Mesopotamia or the Minoan world or ancient China or whatever, where you can kind of see like the little spark, they're there in ancient times, and then boom, you have this explosion of technology and capability. In the Olmec world, there's nothing like that. There's not this shadowy early area. It's just they arrive with the ability to be able to do this. So then we have Monument 19. Show of hands, has anybody seen this guy before? A couple of you Olmec fans in here. All right, so this is Monument 19, the first depiction of the feathered serpent, and they date it, again, this is like a middle date, 900 BC. But that's a very, very rough date, because if you actually go look at it in the Museum of Mexico City, it'll have a label that says it'll say just what I said here. Monument 19, possible depiction of feathered serpent, range 1400 BC to 400 BC. So they have no way of precisely dating anything from the Olmec world. And again, I mean, who's to say that some of these monuments aren't just a little bit older than that? And I want to say this as well. Look at how good the art style is here. It is so timeless. It comes from like the primordial edges of early history. There's no precursor version of the feathered serpent that we're aware of. There's no depiction of the feathered serpent that's more ancient than this. They just arrive on the archaeological record, able to create something that's so masterfully done like this, with the aesthetics that are even pleasing to our eyes, that if I were to make a t-shirt or sell a t-shirt out there with this on it, probably a lot of people might be wearing it right now. So it's just that art style is so good and so timeless, and come up with at the very beginning of history. It's amazing, or the beginning of known history, I should say. And that's a phenomenon that's found all throughout the ancient world. Like the Egyptians, they figure out this perfect art style from the very beginning of dynastic history, at least. And they keep that art style for the next 3,000 plus years, and it's just timeless. It still looks good to us today. So then we have some of the enigmas, which I've already brushed over just a little bit, but we're going to get into it some more. So next is moving the head. So we have an unknown means of transportation. The mosaics weigh over 1,000 tons of serpentine stone for just one single cache. And of the caches that we know of, there are 5 that we know of, right? So over 5,000 tons of green and blue serpentine mosaic stone being transported from the Maya world. Then we have altars. Altar 4 weighed 50 tons before carving. We have heads that weigh between 6 and 50 tons, which there's something really interesting I'm going to get to there in just a moment. The basalt columns that I showed you guys that are about this tall, some of them are cut in half, or maybe they're broken, but they weigh anywhere from about 2 to 7 tons. But then you have the larger ones that are like absurdly large ones that are somewhere around 14 or 15 tons. And the only known form of transportation is balsa. So the balsa is the local wood there, balsa river rafts. So here's what I want to mention about that. So my mentor, Dr. Ed Barnhart, he had a nautical engineer join us in Mexico at the Maya Exploration Center. He joined us in Mexico, and he came up with some kind of algorithm, I'm not sure how do you explain it, but you could put in your hypothetical Olmec head. Say you want a head. What he did was he took a head that was 5 tons. And so if you had this hypothetical Olmec head, this algorithm that he created would be able to tell you how wide and how long your balsa river raft needed to be able to support that head above the water. But then he would have to take the size of that and make sure that that raft could actually go up and down the Coatzacoalcos River system, which is at the heart of the Olmec realm, which is like, we think of the Tigris and the Euphrates River as being the heart of the Mesopotamian world. We think of the Nile as being the heart of the Egyptian world. Well, the Coatzacoalcos River is the heart of the Olmec world. And what he found was that the minimum size of a raft to support a 5-ton Olmec head could not fit down the narrow stretches of the Coatzacoalcos rivers. It would have jammed up against the sides of the rivers and sunk. But the smallest Olmec head is 6 tons, and the largest one is probably just north of 50 tons. So it's a means of transportation that we haven't even slightly come close to solving. And this is something that all Mesoamerican archaeologists just kind of quietly know, and everybody just doesn't really look at it, right? And then so here's this means of transportation. Now that's just kind of a rough idea of how they think that they would have transported it. So what is that? Yeah, it's around 90 miles. Another idea is that they took them north into the Gulf and then brought them back down into the river, but we just don't know. What I think that we should do is there should be some kind of radar, because if they're moving this much and they're moving it through water, we should have some kind of sonar radar and just go up and down the river systems like the Coatzacoalcos River. And if you just ping that thing down there, you're going to be able to see some 30-odd plus ton Olmec boulder sitting there at the bottom of the river. And if they pulled those out, I mean, the basalt probably isn't going to erode as much as many other types of stone, and we might be able to solve a mystery of their transporting. Now, this is a fun theory that somebody floated within the last couple of years to the Maya Exploration Center, and there was this idea that they were moved by magnets. When you go to the site of San Lorenzo, in the Red Palace, there is a cache of about 5 to 7 tons of these little magnetite cubes that you see up here to the top left. And I think that they have like a very small magnetic signal. But what people have hypothesized is like maybe they were used for armor, or maybe that they were used for fishing nets, or maybe it was a type of currency or something like that. But none of that stacks up, because if it was armor, we'd find it all throughout the Olmec world. If it was for fishing nets, we'd find them all throughout the rivers. If it was for currency, we'd find it everywhere in the Olmec world. And these things were only found in this cache in the Red Palace at the site of San Lorenzo, buried some 3,000 plus years ago. The only other place we actually see it depicted in Olmec iconography is around this guy's head. As you can see here, these little cubes there. And we don't have a lot of like Olmec jewelry that is kind of like circular square made out of jade like this. Later on, thousands of years later in the Maya world, they have some depictions that look like this, and we know that it's jade jewelry, but this isn't that. This is something completely different. And so somebody floated an idea that that the reason that the royals or whoever it is that's in charge of this society has this massive cache of these magnetic cubes is that maybe they're using it somehow to displace the weight of the heads as they're being transported. I would not even be able to begin to explain how that's possible, but there are some people that have reached out to us that are very certain about it, and they're running experiments with it. And Dr. Barnhart and I think like basalt isn't that expensive. You can get you can have a 5-ton Olmec head made for you, and somebody should just test this out. Maybe I'll have to test it out. So here's another picture of it. You can see our friend standing behind it. That's how massive these things are. So then we have elongated skulls, were-jaguars, and ancient kings. So one of the big mysteries here is who is the were-jaguar and the were-jaguar child? Is he a king, is he a shaman, or is he both? On the left, we have the shaman emerging with a child. He's like emerging out of a cave. These are in those altars I was showing you. Notice that his head is elongated and he's wearing that hat over it. But on the right side, we have what we think must be an Olmec ruler of some kind. He's wearing the helmets that you see, which a lot of people think that, and I don't think it's a bad thought, that the helmet represents the fact that he was a ball game player. Now, some people, this is what we do as Westerners, because we inherit our logic from the Greeks. The Greeks are very categorical, right? You want to divide things up into nice, even cubbies that are simple to us, right? And so we look at that and we're like, oh, that's not a ball game player. But think about it this way. Who here is familiar with the Roman Emperor Commodus? He's played by Joaquin Phoenix in The Gladiator. Well, the way that the real-life Commodus commonly depicted himself was as a gladiator. Even though the gladiators were slaves and they weren't meant to be people that were idolized, you just couldn't help but idolize a gladiator because they're so badass. You know, you see a guy just slaughter these people in the ring and everybody thinks it's cool. That's why we're all overwhelmed when we watch like UFC or some kind of sport or something. We see an athletic activity, everyone is compelled to enjoy it. This is the same thing. This guy is probably an ancient ruler of some kind. We don't know if he's a king or an emperor. I mean, we have literally no idea. But he had to be a very important person, and we know that these are portraits because every single Olmec head is distinctly different than the other, and they're all wearing this helmet. And so what I think is probably the fact that he can commission this and have this portrait of himself made is an indication of how powerful he is, and the helmet is a display of how cool he is. You know, he was a great ball player or whatever. Maybe even if he wasn't actually a great ball player, because Commodus would like poison his opponents and then slaughter them in the ring, right? So it's a display of power and admiration. And also notice that the Olmec heads are not elongated. So then we have the shamans emerging with the child. So what's interesting about these is people always say, I don't know, I hear a lot of archaeologists with ideas about this, and I just don't agree with them. What they'll say is that this depicts some kind of mythology, some kind of origin myth or whatever. Now, what I think that these monuments are is that they are actual screenshots of time. So you see this guy on the left? That is the same monument as this one. We're just seeing it from the left side. Looking inward. What I think we're supposed to do with these Olmec monuments is unravel them. You know, you kind of like take a cube and like a paper cube and you unravel them, flatten it out. It's one continuous scene. And so what I think that we're seeing here, and again, notice the hats on these guys, Also, notice the hat on the left looks so similar to it's either the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt in Egypt, and then notice that the hat on the right has the uraeus, just like the Egyptians do. So we see a lot of similarities here that are kind of compelling. So what I think this is depicting here is some kind of procession of Olmec children being brought out of a cave, multiple of them at the same time. They're all emerging from the caves, and they're being carried by shamans. And notice that the children have the downturned jaguar lips, and notice that the shamans, or the older people that are with them, they also have these downturned lips that the Olmec heads don't have in the same way. This guy's kind of grimacing, but it's not the same sort of downturned jaguar lips. And I think as I show you more and more and more, you'll be able to differentiate as well. So who is the were-jaguar child? Was he touched by the gods? So this is something that some pieces I fit together. I have never, ever seen another Mesoamerican archaeologist ever propose this theory before, and they would probably all disagree with me, but they're wrong. So the were-jaguar child. So I was thinking about this. I was reading the conquistador accounts when they first arrive in the Aztec world. And now the Aztecs are pretty much, they just like absorbed the culture of Mesoamerica. The Aztecs aren't even Mesoamerican in a certain sense. They came down from possibly this area of the US, they came from somewhere north of Mesoamerica, and they were kicked out because they were just like savage marauders, right? Savage mercenaries. So they come down into Mexico, they're looking for a place to live, yada, yada, yada. They conquer so much of the Mexican Valley, establish their empire, and 150 years later, they've absorbed everything good and bad about Mesoamerica, and they're the predominant culture of Mesoamerica. So the Spaniards arrived, and they're taken to Moctezuma's castle. Now, what's really interesting is there's a lot of Star Wars that's inspired by Mesoamerica, and people look at like, does anybody here know that Yavin 4 in Star Wars is just the Maya city of Tikal? Has anybody here ever seen that before, where the Millennium Falcon takes off? Well, there's more. Jabba's palace with all the weird creatures in it, that's based on Moctezuma's palace. He had all these deformed people living in his palace with him, like people that the Greeks would look at when they were born and go, oh, and they'd leave them up on top of a mountain, right? The Mesoamericans don't see people this way. All throughout the Mesoamerican world, people with deformities or people who are different are venerated, and they're seen as being touched by the gods. There's something clairvoyant about them. Has anybody here ever had a legitimate conversation with somebody who has a learning disability, and you almost see that they're like clairvoyant in a way? They're like totally, completely pure, and they exist in a way that none of us exist in, right? Everybody's had an interaction like that, right? I think that Mesoamericans saw these people the same way. They saw them as being special. And this was something that puzzled and amused the conquistadors. But I thought that's really interesting. So I take that idea and I go back to the Maya world, and we see the Maya venerating dwarves, and we see them venerating people with disabilities. Well, you take that back and you start looking at the Olmec world, and we see these traditions being carried through time. And so when you start looking at the Olmec world, I start thinking about, well, there are a lot of weird depictions of people in the Olmec world with these downturned lips, and you see statues of babies, like full 3D dimensional statues of babies, and you can tell that the baby may have something like Down syndrome or something like that. And you see other depictions of different babies with these downturned lips and fangs, but then you see some depictions of babies that look like, anatomically what we call normal, right? So we see some differentiation here, and actually more acknowledgement of what seems to me of deformities than any other ancient culture throughout the world, let alone Mesoamerica. So my wife is a dentist, and I've been going back and forth with her a lot about this. And in the 1970s, there was a scientific consensus done among the indigenous children of Mexico, and what they found was that these kids that were living in these small villages had a disproportionate amount of them were born with a defect called ectodermal dysplasia. And essentially what that is sometimes it comes with learning disabilities, but usually it doesn't. And my wife has seen, my wife's a pediatric dentist. She regularly, it's not that often, but regularly sees kids come in with this deformity, and often they'll do implants and things like that. But the kid has no learning disability. He's fully there, just like every other kid. But what they will have a lot of times is 2 fangs in the front. Sometimes they'll have fangs in the bottom. And so I began wondering, when we see so many depictions of what's clearly here a baby, we see all these other depictions of babies born with deformities, I wonder if these primordial people living in the jungles of Mexico aren't seeing something special about these kids. And what is the most dangerous animal in Central and South America? Jaguars. So clearly people are seeing that there's some kind of connection here. Like, how many of us, when we were kids, would talk about, oh, my spirit animal is a wolf, my spirit animal is a tiger, blah, blah, blah. We are inherently infatuated with dangerous animals, and we're fascinated by them. And ancient people even more so. So continuing on, and we might touch on that a little bit more in the future. So who had elongated skulls? So these are two elongated skulls that I photographed in Veracruz, Mexico, in March of 2024. And these guys are all over the place. And in fact, actually, you don't ever see Olmec skeletons because their soil is so acidic, but they just opened up, or they gave us permission to go into a museum in the western edge of the Olmec world at a site called Chalcatzingo. And there's the one preserved because it's a much more arid and dry area, not like these swampy, acidic soils that will just completely disintegrate a body. I mean, bones and all. Because Chalcatzingo is so much more dry up in the higher elevations of the western Olmec heartland, this body was preserved. And I just saw him a few months ago, and he too had an elongated head. So we know that the Olmecs were elongating their heads as well. I mean, we know that for a fact. We see it in their iconography. Now we found the bodies, and we can see the bodies, and we know that that's the case. So who had elongated skulls? On the left, we have what's really interesting here. This is like a screenshot of the Olmec world, like a procession, an actual event taking place. Super, super rare to find anything like this in the ancient world. Can anybody think of an example of an ancient site or something that they've seen that's a piece of art that is actually depicting a moment in time? Not really. It's usually like these ethereal concepts and ideas that you see depicted in ancient times. But this is an actual moment in time. Those are 6 stelae standing behind this procession. You have all these men gathered together. If everybody can see, there's kind of like there's a figure in the center in the back who's facing the rest of them that's made out of a different type of stone. I believe it's like a red sandstone. And then you have people walking in front of him. It may not be as clear here, but it's a procession that's taking place. But we have no concept of what is actually happening in this. But it's a very interesting screenshot of an ancient moment in time. And then I showed this is the smallest head that's here on the right, and I wonder, like, is that guy elongated, or is it just he just couldn't afford the big stones like the other Olmec rulers could? So who I think had elongated skulls are definitely the were-jaguar people. Whether the skulls are natural or whether they're skull binding, you know, ancient people do so much in the name of their religion. Like, they erect all around the ancient world. I mean, look at Cambodia, Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Greek world, the Minoan world, the Roman world. I mean, gosh, you can go to China, everywhere. People erect so many monuments in the name of their gods. And I just don't agree with this idea that ancient people were naive and they were just imagining these things, or that they were created to be social constructs meant to confine and restrain and manipulate people. I just don't think that. I think that they somehow, their pineal glands or whatever are not as calloused as ours, and they were much more in tune with the natural, spiritual, cosmological world that's around them. And the missing key here is obviously psychedelic substances. I think that they're leaving this plane of existence, and through one way or another, they're having these collective experiences that form religions. And so I think it's the shamans that are possibly seeing things in these nether realms. And I don't know, maybe they're seeing beings with elongated skulls. They want to be like that. I mean, that's what I think that it is. It's this longing to be like something. And so they elongate their skulls. And I think that they are purposely creating a section of society of people who are engineered, or I should say, like selected with these deformities to be born with the were-jaguar. They want people born with ectodermal dysplasia. That is you are born with the right of the passage of the were-jaguar, the power and the knowledge of the were-jaguar within you. And your sacred right is the fact, or is when these shamans would gather these children together take them into the caves, perform some kind of ceremony, because we found these caves in Guerrero, Mexico with the paintings on the wall. We know that the Olmecs were making migrations out of their homeland to these caves in the west, and they're performing sacred ceremonies with these children, and when they go into the cave and come back out, they're imbued with the power of the were-jaguar. And I think that these monuments here, because we know that shamans would sit on top of them and teach in their, like cults and mystery schools, whatever it actually is, we know that they're sitting on top of them because we see cave paintings of them sitting on top of the altars. But what I think that this picture is, it is a proclamation of the were-jaguar's power in itself, and the shaman that was meant to sit on top of this altar, the baby that's below him, that is him as a baby. It's a screenshot in time, right? The Olmecs are one of the only ancient cultures that actually give us actual, literal screenshots in time. You can see actual moments of their civilization. And then on the right, this is a Olmec monument that's like, its entire body is spinning and contorting. It is obviously a still stone statue, but it's in motion. That head is spinning around. On one side of the head, you have a totally anatomically normal person. On the other side, it's a person who now has the cheeks and the fangs of a jaguar and the eyes of a jaguar. So it's his head like contorting and spinning around, and he's becoming some kind of new creature, maybe under the use of psychedelic substances. So then they also have unique headdresses adorned with snakes in the front, so we showed this as well. That one on the right, you guys haven't seen that yet, but that's on the other side of this monument. So then, where are the headdresses and helmets? This is this very similar mystery to the Egyptians. All those iconic Egyptian crowns that we've all seen before with the uraeus, the snake on the front, we have never found even a single one of those before. Well, it's the same mystery in the Olmec heartland. We know that these guys dressed very well. They had some swag, and all of it is gone. It just disintegrates into time, and we've never found one article of their clothing. So then we have unknown Olmec heads. They just found the site. It's like a mile-long raised causeway that was found at a site called Aguada Phoenix a few years ago by LiDAR. And I still think they haven't ground truthed it and actually gone out to the site. But that site almost certainly has Olmec heads that we've never seen before. Now, when I was in Mexico, you have these, as you can see, this little museum at the site of La Venta is kind of like thrown together with this thatch roof on it. And it was meant to just really get these monuments out of the rain, because anything that's not made out of basalt just disintegrates over time. Now, these are 3 distinct, massive, colossal heads that are made out of some kind of like volcanic sandstone. It's like a volcanic glass basalt sandstone. I had a geologist with me, and he told me that it's not just sandstone, it's something more unique than that. But these heads are actually much more massive and much thicker than most of the basalt heads. And so there's probably even more of these guys around. But what's interesting is that these heads don't depict the actual Olmec people. There are like trace drawings that have been made of them where they press the paper up against it and you can really get the form of it. And these are actually depictions of were-jaguars, but they're not made out of basalt. So there's some kind of like cultural divide here where the were-jaguars can make colossal heads, but never out of basalt. Only this must be a divine or ruling class that does not participate in the cult of the were-jaguar is allowed to make heads out of basalt. So there's like this dividing line between anatomically normal people and the whole class of were-jaguars, which I should say were-jaguars probably vastly outnumbered the Olmec people. And that's why I say when I bring people through the Olmec world, by the time you leave, when you think of the Olmecs, you're going to think of the were-jaguar rather than the heads. So we have civilization in isolation, question mark. So we're kind of getting to the Americas in a broad sense here. Now, has anybody here ever heard the story of when the conquistadors are exploring the Caribbean? They start talking to native people who had seen dark-skinned tribes sailing in from the east. Has anybody ever heard these stories before? So when Columbus arrives, he interacts with some of these native Caribbeans, and they, through some kind of means of translation, start telling him about these dark-skinned sailors that had sailed in from the east, and they were trading them metal spear tips, like an alloy. And so that's obviously what the conquistadors were looking for. They were looking for wealth and riches. So they start asking them, well, where did you guys get this? And so he tells them that, I'm just going to read it here, it was given to us by dark-skinned tribes sailing up from the southeast sea, so southeast of the Caribbean. So what they would call it is guanine. They would call that metal alloy guanine. Well, what's really interesting is linguists have studied this mystery, and they've actually found that there are some ancient and obscure languages on the western coast of Africa that refer to the same metal alloy as guanin. So you have guanine in the Caribbean, you have guanin off the coast of Africa. And so, but I should clarify here, the Olmec heads actually do look like the indigenous people. I know that, we can paint with a broad brush and be like, well, the Olmec heads have, they got the fat noses and big lips and the, this, that, and the other, and they look like they could be African. But the indigenous Olmec people don't look anything like, when you actually go there and visit them and talk to them, they actually don't look much like the Maya people to their east, or the Aztecs to their west, or the Oaxacans to their south. They look very, very different. And as you travel more and more throughout the Americas, you'll realize that Inca people down in South America look a lot different than Amazonians. Maya people look a lot different than Oaxacans and Olmecs and Aztecs. And you come all the way up to, you meet people who are descendants of the Apaches, or people who are descendants of the Comanches or the Cherokee or the Iroquois. They all look different than each other. Their genetics are incredibly diverse. So the Olmecs actually do look like their heads. And this one time I was on a plane, and this big, thick man comes and sits right next to me. And it's like he was like the size of like a Samoan, wrestler. And he sits down next to me, and I look to my left, and there was a human embodiment of an Olmec head sitting on top of him. Like, he was an actual modern-day Olmec man. And I wanted to take a photo of him, but I was a little scared, and I didn't know how to ask, like, hey, you look like these giant fat heads from 3,000 years ago. Can I get a photo and use that? So I didn't know how to ask that. Now, all that said, there actually is a monument from the Olmec world that they call, you can see it there on the plaque, it's called El Negro. And this is what the Spaniards and early colonists, or I should say the early explorers, this is what they called it. And I have to say, it actually certainly doesn't look like any other Olmec person that I have ever seen before, especially with like the raised hair and that widow's peak. I mean, it's so iconically African, right? I'm open to the idea that there were people sailing across the Atlantic Ocean, and if African traders 3,000-ish years ago, give or take 500 or 1,000 years, if they stumbled into the Caribbean, we know that the Olmecs have these trade routes going all the way down the Yucatan, down to Belize, all the way to Costa Rica, as we've seen earlier. Well, it's very possible that they're also in contact with the Caribs, and that the Caribs know about them. So if they stumble in, they're going to be ushered toward the predominant empire of this area. And, this could be, this monument could be like a cameo of an African who was shipwrecked in the Americas. I mean, the likelihood is that he was never able to make it back. But, I'm open to the idea that we see cameos of people from the old world finding the new world. And I just kind of think it's crazy that, I know we say that Columbus has discovered the new world, but certainly there were people crossing the Atlantic Ocean. Whether they made it back, I'm a little dubious of that. But so then we have Phoenician visitors. I know I'm kind of dwindling down on time. I got a lot more slides. So this Phoenician visitor is something important that we should talk about right now. This is Monument 13 at the site of La Venta. Now this guy that's here on the left, you can see that he's got a turban, like a wrap that's draping down his back. He's holding a flag. He's got a beard, and he's got tall boots on. Absolutely none of that is Mesoamerican or Native American in general. Native Americans don't wear turbans. They are well known for not being able to grow big, thick beards. Anybody here ever seen Wild West photos of Native Americans? Have you ever seen them with a beard? No. And then they didn't have boots that come up to here. They were wearing sandals, but it's a different kind of shoe. And also flags that are carried like this, not banners, is actually an old world phenomenon. Flags come from the Nile Valley during the early pre-dynastic era. You can see on their pottery that they have these reed riverboats with a pole and a flag on the end. And that flag was obviously to help you get up and down the Nile, but it was also a symbol of where you were from. And so from there, the idea of hanging a piece of cloth off of a long stick like spreads throughout the old world. But it's not in Mesoamerica. And then in the middle, we see what I think might be a clay interpretation of this same man or some kind of visitor here. But he's got these really narrow cheeks. He's got the little beard. He's got the little mustache. He just doesn't look iconically Mesoamerican. And so something that's really interesting is if we look at in the early first millennia BC, the Phoenicians are launching expeditions. I mean, they're the seafarers of the ancient world. The Phoenicians were probably, maybe, had something to do with the sea people that are sacking all of the Bronze Age and led to the collapse of the Bronze Age. But they're leading these expeditions around, these sailing expeditions around the coast of Africa. Well, there's been independent explorers and like experimental archaeologists who have sent these boats just a little too far out of the Mediterranean. You go a little bit too far west and you get carried by these Atlantic currents down into the Caribbean, straight into the Gulf of Mexico. So again, as I was saying earlier, if you were to come into the Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico, during the height of the Olmec period, you would eventually run into the predominant empire of that realm, which is the Olmecs. And so there's this possibility that Phoenicians, maybe it was one Phoenician ship, or maybe it was a couple, went just a little bit too far west, and they get pulled all the way down into the Caribbean, into the Gulf, and then meet with the Olmecs, and the Olmecs honor this person, or they commemorate this moment in time as meeting this long-distant visitor on this Monument 13. And what's really interesting, the thing that sort of backs all this up, is to the left of him, to the left and to the right, we have very early Mesoamerican hieroglyphs. And to the left of him, that little foot that's angled downwards, if everybody can see that, even Olmec archaeologists themselves call him the traveler. That is the only way that we know that this guy, that's the only way we know to call this guy. And that banner, just like in the Nile, is a symbol of who he is and where he's from. And so I think, again, it's another screenshot in time. It's an actual moment of something that really happened. Whether he came from Phoenicia or wherever the heck he's from, we don't really know. So then we have Amazonian origins. And it's possible that it's vice versa, but I think it's actually Amazonian. So we have were-jaguars not only in Mesoamerica, but we have them down in South America as well. On the left, you can see all these different depictions of Olmec were-jaguars. And on the right, we have South American Andean were-jaguars. Has anybody ever seen these South American were-jaguars depicted before? I see one hand. So these come from the sites of Chivin de Huantar. Some of them are Olmec, some of them are Moche, some of them are from Tiwanaku. I'm sure some of you guys have heard these names before. All of these carry this symbol of the were-jaguar, this human and were-jaguar hybrid. But again, they are separated by thousands of miles, but they exist at the very same time. And these are two of the most powerful civilizations living at the time. And I think that it's possible that through one means or another, they actually are connected to each other, whether that's by trade route or whether they directly knew of each other. Well, it's a great mystery. If you were to follow land, it's an immensely long journey that would take you through the Darien Gap, and I don't think that's what was happening. The Olmecs, they're in that Gulf Coast, but they also have their territory going all the way down to the Pacific Coast, and I think it's very possible that they're sailing and trading back and forth with people in South America. I mean, when the Spaniards arrived, the western Mexican coast, the Pacific Coast Mexican civilizations there, they were aware of the Moche and the Inca in South America. And I think there's actually a tomb in Oaxaca. If anybody here has ever been to Monte Alban, there's a tomb there called Tomb 7, and it has gold artifacts in it that are 100% South American, either from Ecuador or Colombia. And the archaeologists don't acknowledge that because it creates some kind of, it creates a friction like, well, whose artifact really is this? Whose field of study is this? And so they kind of separate them. But it's very, very clear that, that Mesoamericans are aware of South Americans. So let's continue. Reaching through time and space, this global connection, right? This idea that we can see similarities all throughout the ancient world. I mean, what really is behind that? So the Immortality Key, which I'm sure people have read that book. I'm just kind of throwing a fun call out to it. So these are effigies of mushrooms that I found at a museum in Mexico. And we were with the local archaeologist, and I asked him, do you think that these are depictions of mushrooms that the Maya would have consumed during their ritual? Oh, no. And that's the response that I get. The reason is that, Mexico is very Catholic, right? They're very, very conservative, very traditional. And so that inherently, like the human aspect, like everything, bleeds into the profession. That's not just archaeology and anthropology, it's literally every profession. And so you have, I should say, old guard archaeologists who are sort of, I think that they're inhibited, maybe in the same way that people my generation are, in some way that I just fail to see, but they're inhibited by their preconceived ideas of the way that the world should be, and that bleeds into the archaeology and clouds the way that they interpret data, which is just, it's just the human reality, right? And so you have all these cultures around the ancient world that are seeing and doing same things, and sometimes at the same time. What I should say before I get to this handbag thing, which everybody has seen these handbags before, right? Can I get a show of hands if you've seen them, everybody? So one of the things I've always wondered is if ancient people, rather than knowing each other, rather than being connected like this, like say here's the globe and all these ancient cultures are connected like this, everybody has seen the similarities between the Peruvian stonework, like at Sacsayhuaman or in the city of Cusco or at Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, Pisac, it goes on and on. Everybody has seen the similarity of that gray andesite stonework to the stonework in Egypt, right? You see the similarities. You see how these things work together. You can see the similarities of ancient religions and beliefs all around the world. Well, one of the things I wonder is if rather than trying to connect the dots around the world like this and connecting the cultures to each other, does it make more sense if the cultures are all connected like this? They're all tapping into the same source. They don't have to be directly connected to each other because they're all connecting themselves to the same thing and being influenced by many of the same things, which I think that the path through which we study this more is probably through ancient mystery cults and psychedelics, things that they were taking part in. And you know, that's a frontier of research that some people have dipped their toes into, and some people spent their whole lives studying it and found nothing. But I just feel very compelled that is one of these necessary frontiers of archaeology that really needs to be dived into, studying these cults and the esoteric cosmological knowledge that they had of their world. And is that the key of why so many of these cultures do such similar things? So we get to these handbags. So this Olmec guy, he's about 3,000 years before present. Then we have the Mesopotamian handbags. These are about 2,800 years before present. And then we have the Göbekli Tepe handbags, which are about 11,500 years before present. Now, these Göbekli Tepe handbags, they're a little different, right? You can see the similarities of how these other guys are facing towards their right. They're holding these handbags here. They've got a hand up or a hand down. But the ones that are at Göbekli Tepe they're not the same, right? And so a lot of people have suggested that they're not handbags. I don't know. I just don't feel that super confident about them. And I thought, well, you know, if we could just find one more example of a handbag out there, you know, maybe there really would be something to this. And so I was in Mexico 2 years ago, and I came across the fourth handbag. This comes from the site of Cacaxtla. This is dated to around 900 AD. This is the site of Cacaxtla is like a Mesoamerican Pompeii. It was destroyed by an eruption of a massive volcano, completely buried the city. Like, it's all in situ. The paint is still there. The architecture of the city is still there. I mean, it's crazy walking around it. You're in the Mexican Mesoamerican Pompeii. And one of these sections of the market walls was cut off, where they had the stucco and the paintings depicting everyday market scenes. And one of the men walking into the market, walking into town, is what we see here as like what we think is like a shaman. He's carrying his magic bag, right? It would have psychedelics or something inside of it that is involved with these mystery cults. And he's got his hand up just like this. And as you can see here, it's exactly the same. And so what I think that it is it's symbolic of, I don't know if I want to say knowledge, it's carrying awakening, right? It's carrying the profound realization of the purpose of life itself. That's what I think that so many of these cults were about, and that when people would take part in these psychedelics, they would die to themselves. Like, I'm sure some of you guys in here have played around with them. Hopefully not played around with anything too serious, but how many times do you experience ego loss? You lose this sense of who you are, your pridefulness, and you begin to become very compassionate for the people around you, and you have a much greater sense of humanity. And I think that so many things in the ancient world are alluding to this idea. Anybody here ever wonder where the hell dragons come from in the ancient world? Like, why are they everywhere, but we don't actually have dragon fossils or anything like that? Well, I think that the dragon is I could go back, but that feathered serpent around he's right here. That feathered serpent that's around him, that's a dragon as well. And what I think that dragon is imagine most snakes are born in the ground. They're born in the underworld. They come up into the midworld, right? And eventually, once they master this midworld, they're able to grow wings and fly. The reason I say this is because has anybody here ever heard the term of the Mesoamerican feathered serpent called Quetzalcoatl? Anybody here ever heard that? Or Kukulkan in the Maya world? Well, he is a feathered serpent. And if I were to go all the way back, this depiction of this Olmec serpent that's here, he's got these feathers, he's got these wings coming off of his head, right? Why the head in particular? Because there's a bird called the Quetzal bird in Mexico. And it has this really long tail that's like this long and this little bitty body that's this big with these two wings coming off of it. And from the traditions that still exist today, the indigenous traditions, they know that this is a bird now, but the thought is that in ancient times, they would see this bird fly by, and they're super, super rare, always have been, even in ancient times. And it looks like a snake flying through the air. So what they interpret is that you have the only being in this whole pantheon of species that is born in the ground, comes to the midworld, and then one day somehow it grows its wings and conquers all three planes of existence, right? So it's the underworld, the midworld, and the upper world. Well, I think that that's why dragons exist. Human beings are creating this embodiment of this awakening, this ability to harness all three realms of existence and then conquer them. That's why the Chinese emperor was the only person who was able to wear the dragon pendant on him, because he was fully awakened and the conqueror of all three realms of existence. And so that's what I think psychedelics are like at the core of ancient civilizations. And by ignoring them, I mean, we're ignoring a huge part of their very existence, what they saw and thought of the world around them. So here's the fourth handbag. And then here's a similarity. And then this is the site of Kakashla. You can see the paint that's preserved underneath all the ash. Really, really an amazing site. So then we have the last frontier. This is lost cities in the jungles of North, Central, and South America. This is what I specialize in. LiDAR is getting more and more affordable, and these massive projects that we're taking on in the next couple of years are going to, blaze some trails that universities wish that they could move fast enough to do. And I think that these are some of the last frontiers, really the last frontier of archaeology. I mean, the jungles of Mexico, Central and South America, even some of the forests here in North America and the United States, even in Canada, there's some sites that really can only be discovered by LiDAR. We just found a site south of Moundville that nobody would have ever known was there without LiDAR. The other last frontier that I think that exists is the world of Polynesia. There are so many jungle-covered islands with vast ruins on them that are just basically impenetrable. I mean, if you don't know exactly where you're going. And so we're going to be running LiDAR out there starting in 2027. So here's a photo of me in the jungle. You can see how dense the jungle is, and you can see how the jungle just eats away and covers up these ancient sites. I mean, it's really quite spectacular. They kind of create a new piece of art themselves. Sometimes I'm saddened when I go to an archaeological site and they've excavated the whole thing, pulled all the vegetation off, because it's like, it's already a ruin, and the nature like forming over the site and reclaiming it turns it into a new piece of art. And I think they should just leave it that way, right? It's much more evocative than building a kind of hacked version of what you think this ancient site would have looked like. So this is a site that I found outside of the modern day Mexican city of Chetumal in Quintana Roo. And so we were flying drones as we were going down these little countryside roads, and you can see it's just town after town after town after town. Like Mesoamerica and the Americas in general, if you're leaving one major city and you're just walking to another city, which I should also specify, there are not beasts of burden in Mesoamerica or in any of the Americas. There's no cattle to be pulling these megaliths. There's no horses to ride. They're walking everywhere that they go. Every monument that they move is all 100% manpower. So as you're walking from city to city, you would not really recognize a separation between two populations. I don't know if you guys have ever flown across the northeast coast, like from New York down to DC or something like that. And it's just like you can't tell the difference between all the major cities when you're looking at it from a plane. It's just continuous. That's what all of the Americas were like, maybe except for the Chihuahuan Desert that kind of separates Mesoamerica and North America. But other than that, it's just continuous civilization. So underneath here is a massive pyramid complex that we explored beneath the trees. And you can just see, as you would drive right by and you'd see this little forest next to you, and not even know there's a massive pyramid complex just sitting beneath that. And that's our car, and it's me standing down there. These are three, they call these the Great Pyramids. This is this is outside the city of Nuevo Palestina. These pyramids sit off in the jungle. Everybody can see that pretty clearly, right? These are these three pyramids sitting off in the jungle that have never been excavated, and they sit on private land. You can get out there, you might be able to grease some hands and go check it out. And there's a stele over there. A stele is like a large stone billboard that kind of gives the history of the site. And there's one that's laying over there, and there's some blocks like that tumbled and fallen on top of it. But it weighs probably 10 tons or more or so. And it's never been lifted up to see what's on the bottom side of it, to know the history of the actual site. But again, there are so many of these sites. Actually, I would venture to say that Mesoamerica is the true land of pyramids. Somebody tell me how many pyramids are in Egypt. Anybody know? There's about, did you say 125? That's close. It's very close. It's somewhere around like 125 to like 140-ish. And some of the pyramids have been fully quarried away. Somebody take a guess how many pyramids there are in Mesoamerica. I would estimate somewhere north of about 20,000. That's what I would say. Yeah, there's about 20,000 pyramids. And if anybody has ever driven along the back roads, whether it's in the Yucatan or whether it's in Guatemala, everywhere I've been, it's just, you just look off in the woods and it's like, oh, there's a structure. Oh, there's a pyramid. There's a pyramid. Oh, there's a pyramid. There's another pyramid. And you just realize it just doesn't ever end, In fact, there are archaeological sites in the Yucatan is one place that I can, because the Yucatan is so well traveled and there's so many roads out there, it's not as common to see this in less, urbanized places that I've been. But in the Yucatan, you can have two different archaeological sites that are a 30-minute drive from each other. But as you're driving from one site to the other, you never see a time where there's not buildings around you. And then when you get to the next site, you go, oh, this whole time I was just at one archaeological site. It's just divided like it's two and presented like it's two, but it's all just one. So I'm trying to convey to you the massive scale of civilization in Mesoamerica. Here's something that's really, really interesting. We've been talking about the connections, the invisible connections between civilizations, whether that's in trade routes, and then we've been talking about the invisible connections between civilizations, whether that's taking part in psychedelics, right? Being influenced by many of the same things. There's another invisible level to the Mesoamerican world. For a long time, archaeologists could see that the principles of sacred geometry were being included in the architecture of the Mesoamerican world. But they couldn't quite figure out, okay, what is the premise by which they are working? And ultimately, I could do a whole nother lecture on this, but ultimately, a man, I believe his name is Christopher Powell, came in, and he was a sailor and he was an engineer. Or I think he was a sailboat fisherman in Alaska, and he was an engineer. And he comes in and starts getting involved in Mesoamerican archaeology, and he realizes that the story that's told in the early Mesoamerican like origin myths is like the gods used the stretching of the cord and folding it in half to create the earth. They realized that the Maya people in the indigenous villages today use these cords and stretch them out to these sacred proportions that are in line with the principles of sacred geometry to still create their homes today. And one of the common things that grandparents will tell their children is that they'll say the flowers are in our houses. And what they mean is that these flowers bloom in geometric patterns. Like, everybody's seen this before, right? They bloom in these geometric patterns, and they use the patterns of the flowers to create their houses. And you take those and you extrapolate them to their architecture as well, and it's all included. So he was able to see this method of the inclusion of sacred geometry in the Mesoamerican world where nobody else could. And the professor of my professor, her name was Linda Sheely, and she's passed now, But what she said about him was that he was able to solve this perennial mystery of sacred geometry in Mesoamerica because he hadn't learned enough to confuse himself yet. He wasn't so indoctrinated into the way that you're taught, because it forms the way that you think and process ideas, right? That's why people are able to come in from the side and make discoveries that no one else could see, because you're viewing everything in a different way. And that's not something that should be, despised. It's something that should be welcomed, right? But again, it's that human element, that gross human element that permeates and poisons the well of archaeology. Now, what's really, really cool is this is the pyramid of inscriptions at the city of Palenque. This was actually the very first pyramid I ever saw. I walked in the city with Dr. Barnhart. It was an early, misty morning, and the top of the pyramid was like just emerging above the mist, and it was just such a cool, profound experience. And in the 1950s, an archaeologist named Alberto Ruiz, over the course of 3 years, he excavated this pyramid, and he found this like secret trap door up at the top temple. He lifted it up. He realized it had all been filled with rubble, so they had to excavate every bit of rubble, throughout this huge pyramid that has the stairway that comes down, it angles the other way, and then it has a subterranean chamber at the bottom level of the pyramid. Finally, after 3 years, they get in, and they actually find, I think it's the biggest megalith in all of the Mesoamerican world, which was the sarcophagus of Pakal. And I mean, it's massive. Like it would crush this entire stage if you were to put it here. But when they were finally able to push the lid off of the sarcophagus and they started examining Pakal's body, it's fascinating because we don't see this written anywhere else in the Mesoamerican world. It was an invisible part of their society, and the royal people who were initiated into these mystery cults, had to study what must have been the sacred and divine aspects of the universe, all the secrets of the universe that are encoded in the stars, right? What's very interesting is, of all the things that Pakal could have been holding in his hands, if you look at his hands, what's in it? A sphere and a cube. Nowhere else. He was squaring the circle. Nowhere else in the Mesoamerican world have we ever found anything like that. And it's just amazing to me that the most powerful, most famous, most successful, and prolific Maya king of all time chose to be buried with a sphere and a cube in his hand. And what that tells us is that there's this invisible lower level of the Mesoamerican world that permeates throughout their whole civilization, that we can only see the shadows of it. We barely understand these people. So, getting down now to the very end, this is the city of Bonampak, and I think what this does, and I think that these next few slides are going to illustrate, is this idea of just how little we know of the ancient Americas, and I think you'll get what I mean. So, does everybody see that little road that's curving down to the southeast that comes down towards Bonampak, up towards the north of this satellite image? Well, that road right there is about 10 or 15 miles. And I think that road kind of symbolizes what we understand about the ancient Americas. But south of that city of Bonampak is everything that we don't understand, which is in this jungle here. This is the actual full scale of the Lacandon jungle. And just that little square is what I think that we understand about these Maya people. Now, the Lacandon jungle is a massive, massive jungle that the Maya inhabited, and there's certainly still lost cities and archaeological sites in there. But it's nothing compared to the Petén jungle that many, many different lost cities of the Maya exist within. I mean, 1,000 years of archaeology could be performed just in these jungles, and we hardly understand any of it. But again, these jungles are absolutely nothing compared to what is potentially another planet worth of archaeological discoveries to be made in Amazonia. Just a vast, vast, open world of mystery, and everything that we are captivated with in the search for Atlantis and trying to figure out, like, what did Plato really mean? Is it really based on something? Is it an allegory that's based on many different civilizations that rose and fell? Is he being literal? It's these juicy mysteries that we love, and there's just as much, if not so much more, to be discovered in the Americas. So that's my presentation. Thank you, guys. Now, I didn't know, I thought, I I knew I wasn't going to be able to be super swift with this, but if we have a couple minutes for questions, if anybody would like to ask them.
Thank you for their presentation. It was great. Kind of as a farmer and a soil nerd, I had a question about the terra preta and the acidic soils since you've been down there. Did the native indigenous, they created the terra preta in order to grow because the soils were so acidic, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so they were able to basically build the Amazon jungle?
Well, so that's something that's, I think, like headlines take it and they're like, yeah, you know, the Amazon is man-made. But what it actually is as you're going through the Amazon, it's like this green hell, right? Everything in the Amazon is meant to kill and survive, right? And that's including the plants, is including the soil, including the animals. But what will happen is you'll hit a pocket, this massive pocket, which is like a farm inside the Amazon, that has this black terra preta soil where the Amazonians were growing things like fruit and vegetables that could be consumed. And so these pockets are found, they're like gardens, right? They're found all throughout the Amazon. And the modern indigenous people today know where they are, and so they'll go and they'll live there for a season, you know, consume everything, and then they'll pick up and leave and head to the next one. And these pockets have been around for like at least 10,000 years, maybe more than that. But yeah, it's not that the entire Amazon was cultivated. It was that probably thousands of pockets of the Amazon were cultivated with that black soil. And you know, I just think it's crazy that, you know, we look at these people as being like primitive or simple or whatever. They invented a type of soil that anything can grow in, and modern people have not been able to recreate that soil and figure out how they did that. It's
It
amazing.
actually inspired me, the terra preta story that I saw, to like start making my own soil with biochar as a
cool.
base. Yeah. So thank you for your presentation. It was phenomenal.
Thank you very much for your question.
Hello. Just to kind of add to that, I just wanted to ask you with the Amazon and how much we know about the Mayans and the Olmecs and everything, do you think that possibly the Amazon was home to the greatest civilization in at least Mesoamerica or South America?
I think it's very, very likely. There's a, you know, Percy Fawcett, he was looking for something that may or may not have existed during his time. If everybody here is familiar with Percy Fawcett and the Lost City of Z. And he was relatively in the realm of the Xingu River, which Teddy Roosevelt would later go down. And in the 1970s, there was a site there that was discovered called Kiriguyu. And it had so many, I don't think they've even run LiDAR over it. You know, projects like this is super expensive and not much money out there at all. But the estimate of the population of just that one city alone was 1 million, which is the same size as the height of ancient Rome. So, yeah, it's extremely likely. And also, I should say that when I talk about that were-jaguar, where we actually see that were-jaguar emerge in South America is at a site called Chavin de Huantar. And all those were-jaguars, the tenon heads that are in the building, actually face east out towards the Amazon. So it's obvious that the Andean people are actually being influenced by cultures coming out of the Amazon. And all those cultures that we see, like Tiwanaku and the Inca and everything else, all that, the seed of that culture was planted from Amazonian culture. So I think it's very likely that the greatest civilization of the Americas actually hasn't been found. You know, I've never actually put that into words before you asked me that. But yeah, I do think that.
And then I guess my next question, you're saying that pyramids could have possibly originated from, you know, Central America or South America.
Yeah.
Is it true that the one in El Mirador, is that the actual biggest pyramid that we know about in the world?
Well, you know, I think it's funny how we play with these pyramid stats because, you know, I think this is what it is we think of the Great Pyramid as being the largest pyramid, but actually the Pyramid of Cholula, which is out near Mexico City, outweighs it by mass.
Yeah.
But the Pyramid of El Mirador is larger than the Great Pyramid, and people ignore Cholula, so they say the Pyramid of El Mirador is larger. But yeah, Pyramid of El Mirador is definitely top 3. It's weird because it's not so much. It is a pyramid, but it's actually like a pyramid with two pyramids up here, and then a third pyramid coming up down the back. And the bottom level of the pyramid is where the whole main market of the entire city existed upon.
Right.
So it's just like incomprehensibly massive. But yeah, you could easily put it within top 3 largest pyramids. Actually, it's the oldest Maya pyramid too. So. at the very beginning of Maya civilization, they create the largest structure they'll ever create, and it's never achieved again.
Yeah. Thank you, Luke.
So, thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
So I'm from South America, and I want to speak of the bags. So my ancestors are Incan and Mayas.
Okay.
So I was gifted a bag from the Mamo tribe in Colombia, and what they share with me, the knowledge is that they indeed, it is for the cosmic knowledge. They carry it.
Really?
And the woman weave, they go into meditation and weave patterns. They see into trance. So they download those patterns into the mochila, representing the path of the person, of the soul. So when we women carry, and also men, but the mochila represents the womb of the cosmic. So anything that you put in there is about being mindful. What are you creating? And what are you holding in your creation? So with it, they carry a lot of medicine. So yes, mushrooms, rapé, etc., medicine in the bag. Because the remembers of the plant realm, Mother Earth, are allies to our consciousness. Through the elemental wisdom of the plants, we can access more dimensions within our own consciousness. So when we access that's why the shamanism, when we access the consciousness of the plant, is accessing our own in a more expanded, less limited way. So my question is, have you considered doing the plants to resolve some of your questions when you see the patterns archaeology? Do you find value in also trying some of their ways to access information like they did?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and I think the simple answer is that I'm just scared to. It's something that was clearly so important and so baked into the very existence of not only ancient Americans, but ancient people all throughout the world. And I think that certainly certainly those things are powerful enough to permanently alter the way that you perceive yourself and your interactions with the people around you. And you're probably aware of this, and maybe some people in the crowd, that when people go into the Amazon specifically, they will often have interactions with like a goddess, or they'll have interactions with a huge anaconda or a boa constrictor that will wrap them up and speak to them. And I had a buddy who told me when he was in the Amazon, and he took ayahuasca, this snake like wrapped itself around him. It was whispering in his ear, and it was like, imagine the snake on like Harry Potter or something, the way it would speak. And it was telling him, I love you, but I'm going to kill you now. And it's this idea of like even the cult of Eleusis, it's this, this death before death, right? Like when you step into that realm, everything before that is going to die. And I know that just being as primed as I am, as curious as I am about the Native American world, one day when the snake calls me or whatever, and I step into that, I'm probably going to have profound realizations. But I think the reality is just that the snake hasn't called me yet, and I'm a little hesitant too, just because I know that there's no going back after that. But yes, I have considered it a lot.
It is a death of the ego.
It's a death of the ego.
Only to remember who you truly are beyond who you think you are.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, and that's pretty interesting, that your ego is not actually you. It's like your mask, right? It's a tool.
It's a tool of the mind to navigate these dimensions, and that's why these spirits come support that, because they do exist. It's just a different overlapping dimension.
Yeah, and you mentioned something just a moment ago when you were talking about the bags that they make, and they're like textiles in a way, and the patterns that are written into them. That's another thing that I didn't talk about in this presentation, is the patterns. Has anybody here ever seen the squared circle patterns throughout the ancient world? That is found from Ice Age Siberia all the way around the Old World, down into the Americas, into the American Southwest, all the way into the mound builder world, all across Mesoamerica, and deeply into South America. It's literally everywhere. And I've been all throughout. Everywhere I go in the Americas, the story that I'm told is that that is the cyclical pattern of existence itself, like the staircases and the winding, the repeating of the cycle of life itself. And everywhere I go, whether it's like the Oaxacans or the Inca or the Moche, whatever these existing cultures are, they have a slight variation of that. But everywhere I see, it's like this cosmic cycle of existence itself. So anyways, thank you very much for your question.
Thank you.
Hey, Luke, thank you, man. You're an eloquent speaker, and thanks again. I was just a brief little aside on the handbag. So I just stumbled across the town of Giraft in Iran has a cache of life-size stone-carved handbags.
I've seen, yeah, I think I've seen
Yeah,
this.
that's another one. That's all I was going to say. So.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have one more right here? Okay.
Hi, Luke.
Hello.
Several years ago, I was exploring the, I don't know if you want to call it the temple complex or of Monte Alban.
Right, that's an amazing place.
It's amazing. And what I learned was that one of the indigenous tribes was the Zapotecs. And so my question to you is, when I started to look into it, there were people, some of the locals, who said that the Olmecs were the progenitors of the Zapotecs. In your research and studies, what can you tell us about that?
That might actually be true. Yeah. So we don't really know too much about the contemporaries of the Olmecs. Like, we don't know exactly who they're interacting with. We know that the Maya are around, but they're just beginning. But actually, there is a place called the Pyramid of San Andreas in Oaxaca. I think it's in one of those northern valleys. And I've been to it. You don't see it published anywhere. It is the first pyramid in all of the Mesoamerican world. Or I should say, it's the first pyramid that's built out of stone, and not just stone, huge megaliths like this big. You never see it published anywhere at all, and it's a Zapotec pyramid. And that site was explicitly influenced by the Olmecs themselves from trading with the Olmecs, and they became so wealthy by giving they were trading obsidian with the Olmecs from those Oaxacan mountains. And it's the same means by which the Maya later became wealthy, because they were trading the serpentine and the jade to the Olmecs. But it's maybe not so much that the Olmecs are the origins of Zapotec culture, but the Olmecs are like this mother culture that fostered civilization itself throughout Mesoamerica. And by them being so wealthy, producing so much grain, having so much fish that they're selling throughout the Mesoamerican world, they spread wealth throughout Mesoamerica and essentially gave birth to that civilization. So yeah, I mean, in some ways, yeah, the Olmecs, people kind of ignore that and don't really realize that, but the Zapotecs can trace their origins deeply, and their origins are very well connected to the Olmecs. So thank you very much. Well, thank you guys.
Luke, that was amazing.
Thank you.
We've heard a lot about the Olmecs tonight. I just have one question for you. So I live in the great state of Florida. I don't know if any fellow Floridians here, but there's always construction going on around Northeast Florida, and it's not uncommon that they'll uncover ancient Indian burial mounds within the state of Florida. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of your work has taken you to Florida and done some LiDAR work around there. What can you tell us about that?
There is a lot that's going to come out about it. So Florida was one of the very first places when I got access to this. Like proprietary LiDAR data of the United States, it was given to me by someone who was working in comet research, and they were trying to map out like comet impacts and impressions throughout North America. So one of the places that I started was where I knew there was a lot of like soft, swampy land, right? So obviously it takes me to Florida. So I was looking at the Chattahoochee-Cola River, which is in the Panhandle, and then I started just searching throughout the entire state, down in the Thousand Islands region, in the Everglades, in Central Florida, and in Northeast Florida, and then kind of getting up into Georgia and South Carolina. Man, there are so many sites out there that aren't listed on any publicly available maps. I've found geometric earthworks that look like something out of a sci-fi movie.
I mean, actually blew my mind. If anybody wants to see an example of what I'm talking about, look up Tony's Mound in Florida. I found more sites like that where you can see that they're like causeways and highways with these concentric circles and half circles that must be pointing off at astronomical phenomena. I mean, I've mapped probably 50 different sites in Florida of mound sites that I can't find on any publicly available map. And man, there's so much that's going to come out about there. Ponce de Leon, the conquistador that was exploring around Florida, looking for his fountain of wealth, he describes finding a city that was about a mile off the coast and where he had dinner and was a part of this festival. And I found a site that's enormous that's exactly a mile off of the coast. And so we're going to go ground truth it later this year when it cools down a bit and the water moccasins aren't as active. But yeah, so there's a lot to come out in Florida. And I mean, we're doing this project across the entire East Coast. I'd say the northernmost area we're going is, we're going to be doing the LiDAR project on Roanoke, Croatoa, the colony. We're going to be scanning LiDAR there and doing something on it. So from there, all the way down to Florida. And then we've got the project in the Amazon as well.
Well, I cannot wait to see all that footage and see all that work. It's going to be amazing. As someone who lives in Florida, excuse me, it's Sunday. As somebody who lives in Florida, I can't wait to hear about all that. So thank you so much for your work. And
thank you very much.
Cheers.